Hello and most welcome to 1385 of the Heidegger series. We are today in the countryside, well, sort of suburban countryside. It's 8 minus and sunshine. So for there to be clear weather, sun is badly needed. Without the cold, clear weather, there will be no sun, obviously. But it's very nice. It's glittering from all places. I will continue where I left off in 1384. I was just to the concluding remarks of RQ and N. The system that takes in accord neurology itself, how it's working, and especially the sign of the saccades. The saccades are the momentary actions that happens with the eyes, where they move around, instantaneous jumps, and then a return back. They are not linear, they're not continuous. There is no vision of an outside, three-dimensional, pre-arranged reality. The saccades are most probably the most quantum mechanical I encountered when it comes to the neurology of perception. And we spoke also, there is no reason or sense in talking about individuated experiences. It makes very little sense. And this is first time that we can have good scientific concordance when it comes to this much difficult question of eye movements happening rapidly. This way of explaining is 1,000 times more accurate. And as you might know, if you encounter this subject before, this is one of the most cumbersome problems. Within perception. when I studied neurology in the mid-90s, there were still no explanation for the saccades. And the model used was still the old Greek/Cartesian model of a separation of inside and outside. Scientists in physics had been trying to uphold this Cartesian dualism for centuries until it finally met its fateful destiny at the end of the 19th century. Morrison-Morley experiment of 1887 is the first powerful blow to the Cartesian duality. All of a sudden, no longer were light, flexible, or relative. It was in the Morrison-Morley experiment shown to be a constant of circa 300,000 kilometers per second. Then came the ultraviolet catastrophe, and things were piling up. Reality itself made itself heard. In the 1920s, this led to the demise of the whole Newtonian paradigm. Something very similar is happening to neurology, science of cognition. At the late 20th century, a century and a decade later than the Morrison-Morley experiment, the first paradoxes came to the fore. They started to pile up. The hard problem was first pronounced by Chalmers, the Australian professor of philosophy. An unsolvable nut to crack. In perception, the same 2,500-year-old model of a detached externality became more and more troublesome. This problem was exposed vehemently by Thomas Nagel and called the perspective from nowhere. I would say for the consciousness problem, another paradox exposed was in the book Gödel, Escher, Bach by Douglas Hofstadter. The current idea that had been pestering, lingering around since the early 20th century was shown to be impossible to uphold. The computer model. Gödel showed it is an impossibility to have both a coherent and consistent system. The Turing machine is also depicted in the book Gödel Esche Bach, and it can never have an algorithm that tells it to stop. To tell it it has reached its termination, or that it will not ever reach conclusion. Vision has been obnoxiously fixated with the Cartesian duality, and with the advent of cameras, even more so video cameras, the idea of our eyes being holes in a box to passively perceive. The revolutionary understanding that now comes, that perception cannot be exempted from quantum physics. Saccades show how the classical model always can be correct, but still insufficient approximation, because the model forced on perception of Cartesian dualism is an unproven hypothesis deeply ingrained in our traditions, but far from being scientific. I think the first time this is being exposed is with quantum physics, where the factor of the observer no longer could be ignored. Also prevalent and from a traditional heritage only, the three-dimensionality of the Cartesian coordinates. Later strengthened even more in the Newtonian concept of space. The Newtonian dimensionality will, with the expansion of the solid, stately Cartesian coordinates in orthogonal directionality, be a straitjacket, an uncalled straitjacket for how theories of perception and cognition could be formed. Consciousness, intelligence, free will, otherworldliness, all of them have had to comply to traditional, unproven assumptions. That on top of being incongruent gives paradoxical results. When I studied perception, the viewing homunculus, or the paradox of the homunculus, was simply a thing to be accepted or ignored. A funny thing that was thought some calculation could solve and end with the figure 0. That is defiling intelligence and knowledge. A third disaster for the Cartesian dualism within cognition is, oddly enough, coming from physicists, or to be more correct, one physicist and one philosopher. Roberto Ungar and Lee Smolin showed the utter paradoxality of viewing the universe from the outside, a possible third bad habit with monstrous consequences. They also showed that thinking that you can view the universe from the outside will defile thinking in itself. It's one of those moves you just can't do or shouldn't do. And that makes for a misconception how the process of knowledge works. The same is tried in neurology. We're trying to view perception as it was outside of what we are experiencing. And that causes trouble both in a singular event of the understanding of perception, but more malevolent and more disastrous, it causes thinking in every area to stop, because you don't understand thinking if you think it can be outside, something that is like a bug in thinking. Being outside of the universe is a bug. It is not a false proposition. I would say this is extremely important to make that distinction. It is not a false proposition. It's something much worse. You don't understand the process of thinking. In the nice article, Recurrent Quantum Neural Network and its Applications, they make a good point in the grave and malicious misconception that to perceive something you need to know what it is and then interpret it. You understand directly because understanding doesn't lie inside in a Cartesian soul. Neither is it situated in the res extensa. And since these assumptions, these destroyer of the ability, the verbal thing that thinking is, not a static algorithm or calculation scheme as depicted by Immanuel Kant. This wave of understanding gets disrupted, and the arbitrary non-shared features are called outside and inside. Even thinking itself, because of this unquestioned and unnoticed, I would say non-verbal, definitely non-verbal assumptions of an outsidedness. Language itself got pestered by the dualistic tendencies. Noam Chomsky thinks that words could be something external to the universe, that grammar itself is an inborn trait with nothing more than an indirect connection to reality. We have given up our senses. This is something that created the idea of consciousness, or the reflective consciousness. the rising of understanding from the heart region, soma, thymus, to the kephalo, to the head. Losing proprioceptive connection to thinking, as Richard E. Lind exposed in his great book. This development of consciousness exposed by Richard E. Lind is in cohesion or in cahoots with the division between words that happen in Western alphabetical development. This idea of the essence of the words is unnatural to an oral tradition, or does simply not happen where you have the Aguda system, or even better, pictorial signs for words. This has affected even what we think thinking is. A stream of disconnected meanings. Like a necklace of pearls. And the idea of knowledge, or the meanings in the words, being like golden nuggets to be collected and stored away, is fragmentizing knowledge and making it arbitrary, random, half-fadaces, aphodesis. This is a screaming call for students at academia to develop HDHD, AHDH, D it is, in English ADHD in Swedish. Attention deficit, hyper attention, hyperactivation. This is the very lack of a wholesome, whole experience. Physics itself is governed by unconscious assumptions, things that never ever got hypothesized, and therefore has a foundational influence in everything that gets formalized, analyzed, and understood. These foundational, unquestioned, unseen, darkened assumptions can only influence as long as they are unseen. They need to be brought into knowledge and to be seen as being a part of knowledge, of understanding itself. The fragmentation that evolves is in the theoretical understanding as well as shown by the authors in our perception. By forcing the idea of objects being out there, we will get a narrowed eye globe, something that eventually leads to myopia, forcing perception of the outside bring a strain to the eyes, but in the long run it leads to attention deficit and the newly explosion of schizophrenia as exposed by Ian McGilchrist in his seminal book The Master and His Emissary. Perception or understanding is a movement. Putting the fixated static idea hinders that movement. It causes harm to intelligence. It also disrupts the flow of time, with the exceptions of a few valiant defenders of reality, like Lee Smolin, Stephen Amrosen. Very few have the courage to defend the quantum flow of time. The constructor of everything real, working and becoming. The world becomes unreal, unrealistic, non-happening in the Newtonian paradigm of time and space. All become non-moving, deficit, non-actualized. Because without time, nothing can ever come into existence. We become phantasms on the way to schizophrenia, thinking that thoughts themselves are units that can be put into categories, and that we can use the alphabetically derived syllogism to come to new conclusions, to reach novelty. This has never ever happened. Logic is a way of communicating what you found out. Not the thinking process itself. The confusion in between those has had disastrous effects, as clearly shown by Edvard de Bono. In what I think is his magnum opus, I'm right, you are wrong. Extraordinary book. Hardly ever used in the neo-academia of the Newtonian static paradigm. Thinking that leads to new is asymmetric. It is in the superposition it is living in the realm of potentialities. The after has structure, it has a stale sequential order. The after can never or should never be confused with the before. That confusion is well established within academia. 95% of the neo-academians think a new conclusion can be made by adding the old things. separating, fragmenting those old things in a new fashion, putting them together, renaming them, or giving them supposedly new meanings in a system that imitates the impossible machinery of Gödel axiomatic things giving theorems and vice versa, in an endless cycle that is much closer to an all disk lying on the recorder, stuck on a simple line, regurgitating, regurgitating, regurgitating. Development becomes very hard. Well, that became rather a summary of the whole week. I will read the concluding remarks of Recurrent Quantum Neural Network and its applications. In 1384, I terminated at the two types of RQNN based applications have been considered here. The first application makes a model naturally more intelligent. In this application, complex signals such as amplitude modulated signals and speech signals are denoised. Without making any assumption about the signal and noise as well. In contrast, all prevalent techniques use a priori information about the signal and noise before signals can be denoised. And here we have the incredibly important point. All prevalent techniques, and that goes not only for theories of perceptions, but all current theories outside quantum mechanics, use, like Chomsky, like neo-academia, an idea of what the voice, the light, is telling, presupposing that superposition simply does not belong to this world. That we can use old, stale straitjackets for our understanding, and that perception is that. An understanding in a Lockean way. Immanuel Kant would be very fitting in the new neo-academia. The second application is a quantum brain model of eye tracking. The key concept here is that quantum-based models can be more predictive to explain complex biological phenomena such as eye movement behavior. The interesting finding is that our theoretical model of eye tracking agrees with previously observed experimental results. The model predicts that eye movements will be of a saccadic type while following a static trajectory. In the case of dynamic trajectory, The eye movement consists of saccades and smooth pursuits. In this sense, the proposed quantum brain concept is very successful in explaining the nature of eye movements. Earlier explanations for saccadic movement have been primarily attributed to motor control mechanism. Whereas the present model emphasizes that such eye movements are due to a decision-making process of the brain, albeit a quantum brain. Thus, the contribution of this chapter for explanation of biological eye movement as a neural information processing event may inspire researchers to study quantum brain models from the biological perspective. The other significant contribution is the prediction efficiency of the proposed model over the prevailing model. The stochastic filtering of a D signal using R, Q, and N is 1,000 times more accurate compared to a Kalman filter. This clearly goes to show the superiority of using the Schrödinger wave equation in perception neurology. We need to understand that the brain, the biological systems, thinking, what is real, what is perception, is all cleared out by the Schrödinger wave equation. We mix classical, non-working, defunct theories ruled by unthought hypotheses, unverbalized ideas of inside and outside. And the more we go in that fashion, the more we leave reality, the less knowledge we get if we do not make knowledge itself quantum wave-like and not Newtonian. I will here end the lecture. The first part became rather odd. I hold the paper, but I was rather making a summary of the past week's rather significant developments. You are most welcome to see the different quantum physical explorations that we made in the recent meeting. There is an English part of the recent quantum meeting for you who are English speaking, and for your Swedish there is a rather longer, less of a summary discussion now, variety in Swedish. I say thank you very much. It's a gigantic record with 1 hour summary. Have a very pleasant afternoon and bye bye for now.